Good morning and welcome. I would welcome you to the university, except I would probably ruin the name in pronouncing it, so I will refrain from doing that. But it is a wonderful venue, and we're very thrilled that the university has chosen to host us. My name is Mark Weitzman. I direct government affairs for the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I'm also a part of the U.S. delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, where I chair the Committee on Antisemitism and Holocaust Denial. We are very grateful to be here with such a distinguished group of speakers. The introductory remarks this morning will be followed by 4 panels, which you have in your programs, and they will really tackle the idea of public discourse on the Holocaust, its use and abuse in a variety of ways and media. To start with some brief introductory remarks before we begin, just to frame the context of this event, I would start off by saying that the Holocaust has certainly been described as a watershed event in recent history, certainly in European history. Along with the Second World War, it was an event that significantly shaped our world, especially in Europe and the West. It influenced the borders of European countries, impacted the historical narratives of peoples and their countries, and the monuments and memorials that have shaped, and sometimes very controversially shaped, as we know today, and illustrated these narratives, defined their demographics, shaped their political and legal structures, informed philosophical, theological, and cultural discourse, and was heavily represented in artistic, literary, and creative work. Internationally, reactions to the Holocaust can be seen as formative elements in the creation of bodies such as the United Nations, the European Union, the International Criminal Court, and the War Crimes Tribunals that attempted to build on the legacy of Nuremberg and the trials and other trials of Nazi criminals. We see it in traces of the development of the primacy of human rights in international law, and in the concept of principles such as R2P, the responsibility to protect against genocides, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. But the Holocaust has also become a significant staple of popular culture as well. From blockbuster films like Schindler's List to comic books like Mouse, it is now a constant of popular discourse. There are references everywhere you turn, in the U.S. Republican presidential primaries, in statements by the Prime Minister of Israel, in controversial films in Berlin, in reality shows on television in Lithuania, and of course, in recent and ongoing controversies here in Hungary, particularly focused these days on the statue, and I will join with members of the government in saying the statue is really that should not be built and should not be even conceived of having been built at this time and in this place. The Holocaust is constantly referred to when opinion makers and even street mobs wish to comment on Middle Eastern politics. And even more, or actually especially online, the presence of the Holocaust is pervasive. The range of Holocaust-related materials available there is enormous. On the positive side, it includes scholarly works, presentations by memorials, museums, and educational institutions, survivor testimony, and archival material. On the negative side, it can be a cesspool of Holocaust denial, distortion, and neo-Nazi propaganda posted by anti-Semites from both the Christian and Muslim world. But the most significant shaper of online Holocaust discourse, perhaps, is something known as Godwin's Law, formulated in 1990, which simply states that if an online argument or comparison to Hitler or Nazism goes on long enough, if an online argument or discussion goes on long enough, invariably someone will use a comparison to Hitler or Nazism. And someone else, or one of our colleagues, Alex Balls, will refer to that in more detail later. In addition to the law is that whoever does so is automatically the loser in that argument. Godwin's Law itself has become such a pillar of online rhetoric that it was given its own entry in 2012 into the Oxford English Dictionary. It is apparent that the use of the Holocaust in all facets of popular discourse is not losing steam and is regularly increasing. The power of the Holocaust to shock in its extremity of hate and genocide has made it the most potent cultural signifier that we have for pure, malignant evil. In that sense, we who study and teach about the Holocaust have succeeded in embedding it deeply into the public consciousness. Yet in that very success lies the questions that are at the heart of this conference. Has the Holocaust lost its specific historical reality by becoming so popular? Are there appropriate and inappropriate uses of the Holocaust in popular discourse, in political discourse? Does a specific media affect how the Holocaust is portrayed and how it is received? Should we try to control how the Holocaust is portrayed? These are just some of the questions that arise when we consider this issue. This conference is sponsored by the only international organization that deals specifically and solely with the Holocaust and related issues, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA. Created in 1998 and formally based on the Stockholm Declaration of 2000 that committed its signers to actively remember the Holocaust by supporting Holocaust education, research, and remembrance, it is expanded to include issues such as anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, the genocide of the Roma, and comparative genocide. The IHRA has now grown to encompass 31 member countries, 10 observer countries, and 7 international partners, including the UN and the EU. Each member country is represented by delegates drawn from the political leadership and the experts in these fields. The idea for this conference was initially proposed by the IHRA's Committee on Anti-Semitism and Holocaust Denial, and each panel is moderated by one of my colleagues from the committee, Alex Laws from the UK, Drs. Felicia Waldman from Romania, Juliana Wetzel from Germany, and Robert Williams for the United States. They have been colleagues in every step of the planning of this conference, and I thank them for their commitment. I would also like to thank the permanent office of the IHRA, notably Dr. Catherine Meyer, the Executive Secretary, and Yolanda Bretman, whose pleasant but painstaking and persistent attention to detail was invaluable in the planning of this event. I would also like to mention that you have the privilege of hearing more later from Professor Yehuda Bauer, who really was the initiating force behind the creation of IHRA and will be our keynote speaker during the lunch hour. Finally, I would like to gratefully acknowledge the co-sponsorship of the Hungarian chair of the IHRA, Minister Szabolcs Takacs, and the head of the Hungarian IHRA delegation, Ambassador Vince Szalibovitsky, and their team, particularly Viola Gurisev-Pap. The chair immediately recognized the importance of this conference. He has encouraged the experts to do their work in an open and professional manner and has been totally supportive throughout the entire process. In difficult and divisive circumstances, he has joined with us to affirm a mutual commitment to the principles of the Stockholm Declaration to plant, quote, to plant the seeds of a better future amidst the soil of a bitter past. It is our hope that our discussions of that bitter past of the Holocaust that's framed today in popular discourse will contribute a deeper understanding and perhaps even some initial practical steps toward that better future. And now I'm going to present, it is my privilege to present Minister Takacs.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Maybe I think, yeah, okay. Maybe, welcome. But I think I would pass the floor to...
A little confusion on my part. It is my pleasure to present the international spokesperson of the Hungarian government, Zoltan Kovacs, who is actually the holder of 2 PhDs, and he will refer to that as a trained historian a little bit later. But he has a great deal of professional experience both in academia and in government, including most recently Minister of State for Social Inclusion, prior to that Minister of State for Government Communication and Public Relations. I'm not going to go through all the posts, but he's also been a practicing academic as a lecturer, as a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, as a fellow also at Oxford University, and really I think we are very grateful for the combination of trained historian and active politician who is coming to give opening remarks and welcoming and formally begin the conference that we're here for today. So,
Mr. Weitzman, thank you. If you don't mind, I just try to keep this as informal as possible because I believe confusion is enough here at the table. And we see that the IHRA presidency, the Hungarian presidency is going well. It's very well organized, so we appreciate the work of the State Secretary and all who are included in organizing this very important and precious event for us. There's always a temptation to approach events like this and opening ceremonies from a personal perspective, which I'm not entitled to do very much because I'm a government spokesman at the moment. So, you know, when I wake up, I immediately have to kind of drink my coffee from that perspective. But I dare to refer to a couple of issues, actually, that has been behind us concerning the IHRA presidency. And first of all, the Debrecen meeting, which was going very well. That was the second plenary, as I understood, of the Hungarian IHRA presidency. And obviously I'm biased towards Debrecen because I used to serve there as a communication counselor as well as a representative in the local council, and worked together with Mayor Kósa and the present mayor actually on refurbishing, reinventing the city in its present form. You've seen, you witnessed for the past 3 days. And I believe the cooperation with the local Jewish community there can really serve as an example actually, not only for other communities but also for the government. And I also recall my personal experience from the northeastern part of the country, because I was born in a small village, Abauikér, which is traditionally an ethnically very mixed region of the country, and where the annihilation of the Jewish community has really left a big hole, not only in remembrance, not only in history, but also in the everyday working of those communities. And I recall those visits actually with my nephews, which we regularly do, to the abandoned Jewish cemetery at the end of the street actually I used to grow up. And I hope that cemetery can also become actually one instance where this cooperation with Jewish communities around the country will help to keep those memories, those cemeteries alive. And coming back to my official position, I believe that all those topics we have chosen during the preparation course and for the Hungarian year, namely the fight against anti-Semitism, which is obviously one topic for today's discussion, Holocaust education, which I had the privilege actually to work with Mr. Elon Moore for a couple of years, inciting the exchange of students and teachers from primary and secondary education, and also bringing in the topic of the genocide of the Roma, are living examples of the commitment of the Hungarian government to what we are doing and what IHRA is doing for a long time now. We have quite an experience of the use and abuse of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust itself. I believe we should be and we shall be very honest and very outspoken on this, and that I believe that the past 5 years that's your experience with the Hungarian government. But also we have to be very careful about approaching these issues. Not because we have anything to hide, not because we would like to make new interpretations, but because there are facts which we cannot change, and that is that Holocaust, not only because of the Hungarian Jewish community, which is the biggest, probably one of the biggest in Europe and the most thriving around the world, but because of the Holocaust, which is an inalienable and integral part of Hungarian history. And there has been so many attempts to try to change that fact, and there are so many challenges we have to face to stop that happening, even the very attempt to challenge these facts. So there's a lot to do, and the best we can do, agreeing with the topic of our IHRA presidency, the efforts of basically everyone in this room, is through education. As a historian, I'm a professional historian, I truly believe that this is probably the most important and sole weapon against the misuse and for the proper use of terms, terminology, approaches to historical events, including the Holocaust. I'm not going to go into details, that would be beyond my mandate, but I wanted to call one quotation, actually, my favorite, from Imre Kertész. Notwithstanding the use and abuse, his words should serve as a guideline for all Hungarians, including the Hungarian government. The Holocaust is a value, I quote, "The Holocaust is a value because it has led to immeasurable knowledge through immeasurable suffering. Therefore, it has an immeasurable amount of moral reserves in it." With these words, I wish you a good conference and a nice discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words of encouragement and even of wisdom. and we hope to certainly carry them forward. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we also have here today a number of ambassadors from representing various countries. I think 4 or 5 are here. I'm not going to ask each one to stand up because I don't know exactly who's here, but I think more importantly it sends a specific message of interest and concern from the international community about the topic that we are dealing with, and even some of the controversial issues that we are dealing with, both in relation to Hungary and the wider European community regarding this. So I want to thank them for taking time from their busy schedules for coming here. I hope they will stay as long as they can and will participate in the conference to the fullest. It is also my pleasure, and in this case really is a pleasure, to be able to introduce the chair of IHRA, Minister Szabolcs Takacs, who has been guiding IHRA through this past year, who has taken IHRA through some, or has gone through some difficult and somewhat stormy waters, but has managed to do that in a way that is both productive, constructive, and even-keeled, for which we are very grateful. In his formal role, he is currently the, has a background as well, with a Master's in European Studies and Law and an MA in International Relations. He has been the Office of the Deputy State Secretary in charge of bilateral relations with European countries and international development cooperation, has been I'm just skimming over, Deputy State Secretary for Global Affairs, and has a wealth of experience, including handling a lot of Hungary's European affairs at this point, and still has managed to take time through that schedule to devote carefully and conscientiously to IHRA, and with full appreciation of your commitment and what you have achieved, it is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weitzman, and good morning to everyone. I was inexperienced enough to give the floor before me to 2 historians and a communication expert, so I'm now in a really difficult situation to talk after them. But first of all, I'd like to start with the greetings, and I'm very pleased that the government spokesman, Zoltan, Kovacs, my colleague, is with us, and of course I'm very pleased that the chair of the Committee on Antisemitism and Holocaust and Island of IHRA, Mr. Weitzman, has invited us to this very important conference. I have the honor to greet, of course, the honorary chairman of IHRA, founder of IHRA, Professor Yehuda Bauer, with us, leaders of the Hungarian Jewish community, President András Heisler from the Hungarian Jewish Faith Communes, and also the host of our IHRA plenary in Debrecen, the head of the local Jewish community, Tamás Horowitz, with us. We are very pleased that you both joined. I have the pleasure and honor also to forward our thanks to the host of this institution, Gyula Sayer, Chancellor, I think this is the right position, who was recently appointed to the Eötvös Loránd University. I can and I should pronounce it. And I'm very pleased that we are here in this building. And of course, I greet all the participants, heads of delegations of different IHRA countries, their ambassadors, some of them in Budapest, and also all the IHRA delegates, many experts from very important IHRA working groups and committees. As there have been references to it, we just concluded the second plenary session of the Hungarian chairmanship of IHRA in Debrecen. And I think we are after a full day of very substantive, colorful, fruitful, and substantial debates. And I think this was a debate which happened on the 15th anniversary of the establishment of this organization. And one of the most important decisions that we made, I think that we decided that there should be and there will be a professional, unbiased, neutral evaluation of the work of IHRA, which we are all committed to, and we know that this is a very important work, and we are absolutely confident, without an evaluation, that what we are doing in IHRA is undeniably very important. All 31 countries, members, and 10 observer countries. However, I think it's very relevant and timely to have an assessment of how others see us, how an independent, neutral evaluator sees us from a professional point of view. Because I believe that, and this is what we are experiencing, while these countries, democratic countries, that are members of IHRA, because of course it's a principle and it's a requirement to be fully committed to the mission of IHRA, to be a full member. While we are all committed to it, still the same representatives of the same governments and countries sometimes look at the Holocaust from a different perspective, through a different light. And let me just bring you to a discussion, a debate which is ongoing now in the European Union, which is about the data protection regulation. And in this connection, many IHRA delegates have a very strong concern that because of a strong legal argumentation, some might be given the liberty to interpret the law in a way that would block an open access to research on the Holocaust. But then, in a way, it would go against the commitment to the Stockholm Declaration, which said that the Holocaust was an unprecedented and unique tragedy of humankind and of human history, the end of civilization. And if we stick to that ideal, to stick to that commitment, then there should be no room for interpretation. And this is exactly what brings us to this conference and the importance of this conference, how the Holocaust is viewed, how it is used and how it is abused in discourse, political discourse or public discourse. We have, of course, a strong commitment that we would like to talk about the Holocaust as much as possible, in the widest manner possible. This is the mission of IHRA. A research on the Holocaust, a comprehensive and not selective, and the comprehensive and not selective presentation of it in teaching materials, in museums, wherever it is applicable, to educate the wider public and, of course, the young generations. So while on the one hand, we are committed to the use of Holocaust in public discourse as much as possible, some are doing just the opposite, abusing it. If I may talk also a little about the very important work that this committee in IHRA, dedicated to fight anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, is doing. IHRA, as we have heard, was established to do research and to educate on the Holocaust. But of course, doing that, and through our work, through our fulfillment to our obligations and the dedications, we also fight against anti-Semitism. We are living in a dangerously changing world, where we can see the rise of anti-Semitism again. And we know that many anti-Semites in Europe and in other countries exactly apply the denial and distortion of the Holocaust in what they are doing. We can see different forms of anti-Semitism, and in May, the government of Israel, May this year, organized a very important conference for the 5th time on the fight against global anti-Semitism. And one of the conclusions was, of course, that Holocaust denial and distortion is one of the most dangerous elements of anti-Semitism. In this country, in Hungary, we see a different kind of anti-Semitism than what we see in many European countries, where the physical attacks and lethal attacks against Jewish communities and Jews are, unfortunately and tragically, and really threateningly, have become I would say, not a daily reality, but an almost daily reality, when communities live under the shadow of fear, and they are considering to leave the continent where they do belong. Because we in Hungary and our government is absolutely committed to the notion, to the principle that This, our European culture, is based on a Judeo-Christian tradition and values. And we wouldn't like to live in a Europe where the Jewish communities have to live, and we wouldn't like to live in a Hungary where the Jewish communities have to live. That's why we are absolutely committed to our zero-tolerance policy against anti-Semitism. In this country, neither among the walls of the parliament nor outside the walls of the parliament can have anyone to make hate remarks and hate crimes, anti-Semitic or other. Because we have laws and regulations that penalize that, and we have precedents. When we brought people to court for denying the Holocaust, distorting the Holocaust, politicians also included. Imprisonment, financial fines, and of course through education, an obligation that they have to visit those places, those museums where an internationally accepted narrative on the Holocaust is shown and projected. But again, we all know that, and this is not true only for Hungary, but for the whole Central Eastern European region, where the tragedy and the trauma of the Holocaust was further deepened and distorted by the policy to forget for half a century by the communist regimes. And this country and these countries are post-authoritarian regime countries, first Nazism and then communism, where a public discourse on anything, not only on the Holocaust, has started only 25 years ago. This is a young democracy in this sense. And many people, of course, using the freedom of speech and the principle of freedom of speech to abuse the Holocaust. They cannot do it publicly. In 2012, we had a precedent case when a person appeared in a rally holding a banner in Hebrew in Hungary which said that the Shoah did not happen. He was brought to court, and this was a precedent case. And since then, there were other precedent cases. Not all the cases. There are cases which are ongoing, the investigations are ongoing, and courts decide this way or the other, but I mean, the general commitment of the courts are, of course, in line with the Hungarian laws and regulations. They have no other choice but to do that. But however, we see that we have these laws and regulations, we still face many challenges. And I believe that one of the topics of this discussion today should be about those loopholes where people abuse these laws and regulations and they avoid these laws and regulations. And one forum is, of course, the internet, where, of course, the content providers are responsible for what they put on the content. But then what about comments? Can you also supervise comments? How do you do that? You remove them, but then you are accused of being a censor. And censorship has a very bad, resemblances in this country. While we do everything to limit that, and of course you are aware of our famous right-wing, radical, openly anti-Semitic Kovacs Info website, on the initiative of some civil society groups, the Action and Protection Foundation in Hungary, which is supervising anti-Semitic deeds and developments, and also the Anti-Defamation League in the US, the Facebook group removed the Facebook page of Kovacs Info, which we were very pleased to see because it helped the work of the Hungarian government, authorities, police, and so forth. However, the server we cannot ban because it is not operated in here. It's operated in the US, where we understand that the principle of freedom of speech is strong enough to let it happen. They would not be able to operate in this country. And I think that's another example of our commitment to the zero policy. So we are working with US authorities on that, and we are asking the support of civil organizations to help our cause. We understand that the principle of freedom of speech is very important, and it should be. But again, what we also discussed in IHRA in Debrecen, that there are differences among the 31 countries in laws, regulations, approaches, and it's obvious because these 31 countries are coming from different historical past. But the goals are exactly this, that how we can approximate our views, how we can make identical answers to these challenges. But what I can assure you is that the Hungarian government, and I think it was very well articulated by the spokesperson as well, and with his personal experience, knowledge, and experience about everyday politics, is another proof that the Hungarian government is fully and uncompromisingly committed to the principle of zero tolerance against any form of anti-Semitism. And we are pleased that this conference is taking place just after the plenary. And I'm quite convinced that there will be a lot of very fruitful, pragmatic, forward-looking, and good conclusions of this conference, for which I wish all the success to you, Mark, and all the participants, to whom we are very grateful that they accepted the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And as we begin, I join with you in welcoming the commitments of the Hungarian government to zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. My only personal wish is that it applied not only to internet as well, but to statues that glorify notorious anti-Semites of the past as well. I would like to, again, welcome all my colleagues from IHRA who are here, the representative of the leadership of the Jewish community, again, which shows the impact and the importance of this topic to all of us. And I think it's time that we begin our work. And so I will invite the first panel to come up. And I wish you all a fruitful and productive conference moving forward. Thank you.